Good afternoon, and welcome to part 2 of our Transformative Leadership Panel series, Nurturing a Talent Pipeline, Best Practices from Academia and Young Professionals. I'm Michelle Dilley, CEO of Awesome. For those of you who don't know Awesome, it stands for Achieving Women's Excellence in Supply Chain Operations, Management, and Education. And it's the preeminent women's professional group for the supply chain industry, with more than 1,600 senior women leaders making up the organization. Our goal is to advance and transform the future of supply chain leadership. And one way that we do that is by hosting these types of virtual events, like today's panel, where we meet with senior women leaders in supply chain for recognition and for sharing their insights on hot topics of what's happening in our industry and beyond. In today's conversation, I'm going to be speaking with our panelists about a critically important subject that builds off of our last conversation around attracting top young professional talent. We had such a great discussion last time about how companies can create really strong pipelines of talent with universities, what Gen Z is actually looking for from campus recruiting, internship programs, and much more. And today, we're going to take the conversation one step further and talk about the what's next once you secure your top talent. We're going to dive into retaining talent. Once you have the team that you want, how do you keep them? How do you keep them engaged, excited, and productive? We're going to and what makes these young, talented individuals in our supply chain really want to stay at organizations? What are they really looking for? I can't wait for you to hear some of the insights from our wonderful panelists. But before we get into the conversation, just a little bit of housekeeping. As the panelists are talking, we encourage you to utilize the chat function, and please submit your questions through the Q&A function. We'll have a Q&A portion at the end of our programming, and we'll answer as many questions as we can possibly get to. So now let's get started. I'd like to quickly reintroduce our panelists today. Joining us, we have Dr. Stephanie Thomas, an associate professor at the University of Arkansas. Welcome, Stephanie.
Hi, Michelle.
Mary Long, who is a supply chain evangelist and most currently is at the University of Tennessee working with the Global Supply Chain Institute. Hi, Mary. Also joining us is Regan White. She is a transportation specialist with Nestle. Hi, Regan. And finishing out our panelists today is Yalen Melendez, who is a senior environmental program owner with Target.
Hello.
So welcome all. It's so great to have you here. Thank you for joining us for the second part of our discussion. And I am just really looking forward to getting into the whole conversation around what really keeps talent at an organization, what excites the team to stay together and to want to continue on their career with that certain company. One of the things as we were prepping for this today, we were talking about how different companies approach assignments, right? So we were talking about how some hire on for a full-time static type of a role, where others have rotational programs, and the duration can vary as well as the rotational cycles. And, I think there's a little bit of benefits to both program. I'd like to hear your thoughts. Regan, why don't we start with you? Because I know you are actually in a rotational program, so you're getting firsthand experience and would just love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, so I'm currently in the supply chain development program for Nestle. So I'm in my first rotation with transportation right now. My program in total can range from 3 to 4 years. So it's a bit more lengthier of a rotational program than you'll see at other organizations. I do have colleagues that are in more full-time roles. And I will say the biggest thing that kind of drew me to a rotational program was wanting to get that built-in cross-functional experience. So what's nice about a rotational program is that when you're hired into the organization, people leaders know that you're meant to kind of rotate around the company and get exposure to different areas. So it kind of alleviates some of the career mapping stress off of you, at least when you're early in your career. So I'm in transportation now. I'm going to be going into warehousing next. And then what I do for my last rotation is still kind of up in the air as I navigate the organization. But it's nice because I kind of get to see different areas of the supply chain without as much stress and pressure to figure out how to get into those spaces as much.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing that. Stephanie, I know you work with a lot of different organizations, and so you've kind of seen both sides of the coin. So would just love to hear your perspective as a professor and what you've seen work well with either type of a structure.
Sure. I think Reagan mentioned a lot of the things that are a huge benefit to rotational programs. And if I'm being honest, a lot of times I have a bias that I recommend rotational programs for students because I do think it can be super beneficial. Supply chain can go so many different directions. And a lot of times, if you've had one internship or one job, that's all of the world whereas a rotational program lets you kind of take the sampler platter a little bit and find out what is the best fit for you. That I think it is really great to see kind of what all is out there. One of the things that I've run into though is that a lot of companies aren't necessarily doing rotational programs well. And I think that is a huge challenge. So, there may be a lot of recommendations, but for example, Reagan talked about different length of time. So some programs, I think the ideal is kind of 18 to 24 months. If you start getting 3, 4, and I've even seen 5 years, for somebody at 21, 22 years of age, that's a long time to commit to something. And
Yeah.
so that can scare people off of like, okay, so how long is your rotational program? And then Reagan talked about you don't have to worry about initial career mapping and getting some exposure in different places. I think it's also great to build your network within a company as well. But if you don't have that, I've lost my train of thought for a second. You don't have that exposure. Crud, I completely blanked on you. I'm sorry, Michelle. I know it is. People always, once you finished, there's not always a career. At some companies, you don't always have a role waiting for you. And
Oh,
so when
yeah.
you don't have a position, then it kind of like goes all Hunger Games of survival of the fittest. And there's a lot of competition amongst these new people that you brought into your organization. You're trying to build this culture. And so you've created a level of competition that's really, really tough. So make sure you're very clear of one, what is the time frame, and do you need that whole entire time frame if it's on the longer side? And two, what is the plan afterwards, and be very transparent about communicating that.
Yeah, because Stephanie, as you're talking about that, I was thinking the rotational programs are really interesting because you do get broader exposure to different areas of the business. However, there may though be those that are in a more static position who have then that experience, longer duration of experience over the rotational ones. And how does that play into, to your point of at the end of the rotational, where do you land for a final job?
And some people just aren't as equipped to deal with change, and they would like to really dive in. And I think Yalen may go into that when she's talking a minute about really kind of become more of an expert in an area instead of just kind of getting the high level on a few different things. So Yalen, I don't know if you want to kind of hop in.
Yeah, I was gonna say no panel discussion is not great unless you have like opposing sides. So Yalen, would love to hear now your experience because you're not in a rotational program.
Yes, so I did not do a rotational program right out of college. I only had one role and I was in it for about 2 years, but what I really loved about that role is I was really able to master my core role, and then just anything that interested me, I was able to make a connection and work on the projects that really gave me energy. And I was able to, take my role and find opportunities or projects, new systems that wanted to be integrated. And I was part of those conversations because I was really in it. And I also loved what I did. And so I think rotational programs are awesome because you finish your rotational program and you have so much more experience than your other peers that are the same age as you. And so as soon as you are starting to look for a role, or you're choosing your role or where you want to go, you can pick the role that you're most passionate about, gives you the most energy, like what was the best experience. And I think in my role, I kind of had to find that myself. Like, oh, I don't like doing this part of my role, but I'm really interested in this side of my company. How can I make a connection, work on a project with them, or integrate this improvement into my role and see the results of it.
Very good. Mary, I couldn't tell if you wanted to jump in and say something or.
All right, yes, I'll jump in on this one. I think that, I mean, I agree with like all the points made. I think of rotational programs as kind of like a Three Bears fairy tale. You know, the story of, is it just right for me? So you have to know what you like. Like Reagan, you know, a lot of other students might nope out at 3 to 4 years, like Stephanie mentioned. And like 18 months might be too short because you won't really, you're not contributing much value. Like in your first 3 months of an assignment, you're kind of just learning. So when you get a chance to rotate, like how many rotations are you going to be able to do in 18 months? So I think it takes some self-reflection to say, what works for me? And then you compare like your different options. Maybe you don't have many options on the kind of rotational programs you're being presented with. Then that's a different choice. But if you can choose between them, then you have to think of what works for you the best.
Great, thanks. So this next question, I really want to ask both Yalen and Reagan your opinion. You know, as awesome scholars and top young professionals, where you are right now, why are you excited to be with the companies you're with, and what's going to keep you there? Yalen, how about you start out?
Yeah, I'd say the culture definitely. And I know everybody says that, but I truly do love my company's culture, and I feel like I'm able to show up authentically, and I feel really inspired too. And I think that's a big part of the culture. And I work at Target, so when I want to feel inspired, I just go to Target. But even internally too, it's just awesome to see like the results my team is driving, new projects we're implementing, and just that continuous improvement is really fun. And I think that goes it just plays a huge part into why I love where I am. And I also love the people aspect of it. So like I'm part of the Hispanic Latino Business Council at Target, and I was able to help organize like her closing ceremony for Latino Heritage Month. And it was super cool to not only do my day job, but also, you know, hire a DJ, get some fun catering, and host a party at my job. That's super fun, and to be able to have those meaningful connections is really awesome. And I also think my leaders too. Like I'm inspired by my leaders. I'm motivated by my leaders. They listen to me. They encourage me. And even my past leaders that I've also had in the company, we still keep in touch. And I think that's really, really unique. And that's why I love my company. That's why I'm here.
That's fantastic. Culture is so critical. So Reagan, why don't you share kind of your thoughts of what you're doing and what keeps you there?
Yeah, and I would say mine stems more from just seeing how much of an emphasis we place on continuous learning and development across the organization. I might have a little bit more niche of a take on this since I'm in a development program. So I do get a lot of that already in my role, but even outside my role, there's a lot of opportunities for people across the organization to get plugged into marketing. Even if you work in a supply chain role, you can do a marketing mission with a marketing associate and really grow your skills and your knowledge of that function. We have open channel challenges where if we're seeking new ideas for certain brands, we open it up to the whole company and you're able to submit your ideas for new products. And if they get selected, then you get to aid in the development of the product and the pitching of it to the executive board, which I think is really awesome because it really encourages a culture of creativity and wanting everyone to feel like they have a voice in the development of the products and the state of the business. So for me, I really like that because I'm someone who wants to keep learning new things, even if it's not always in the supply chain realm. It's also important to understand how finance, marketing, other functions work too. And we place a pretty heavy emphasis on that at Nestle, and I really think that's important and keeps me excited to come to work.
Yeah, Reagan, when we were prepping for this and you shared that example, I just thought that was the coolest thing. I mean, I just think that that is such a great opportunity for the employees to have access and exposure, like you said, to other areas of the business that they wouldn't normally do. But what a creative way to tap into the innovation of the organization as well. Like, I just am like, I applaud Nestle for doing that. I think that's so fantastic. And how do you know by any chance how long they've been doing that, this program?
I think it's been for like 10 years. I've actually submitted a product idea to every single open channel one that we've had since I started with the company. The most recent one we had, my product idea made it to like stage 3 of the selection, but then it didn't make it to the last one. But I got super excited because I would have been able to develop a product that would have had the chance to get pitched to, like our head CEO of the organization and possibly make it to the shelves. And I think that's just really awesome I don't work in product development. So to be in supply chain and get the chance to touch that space is really neat, and really exciting.
Yeah, so I think that that's a great example of just interesting, unique programs that companies can do to offer a different outlet to really keep that top talent engaged.
Well, Michelle,
Yeah, and
what
oh,
Yalen and Reagan were saying is culture and impact. If you're boiling both of those down is, and Yalen really was talking about the people. So you want to like the people that you work with. Yes, the company mission and all that stuff goes into it, but ultimately that comes down to the people executing. And
Right.
then this generation wants to make an impact. And so Reagan talked about the opportunities she's had to learn and do other things, but what's driving that is she wants to make an impact. And so I think if you're thinking about talent and going, how do we bring them in and how do we show that there's a culture here that fits with them and how do we show them a way to make an impact, you're not going to lose those people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right.
I think there's an opportunity too for companies that maybe aren't as brand forward as a company like Nestle's, where you can use that same idea that Stephanie was talking about of showing meaningful impact. And it could be more like in that company's wheelhouse around process improvement. So it could be that the ideas are more open, like that same culture, Reagan, that you talked about, have it be that the ideas are how can we improve processes and then be part of that cross-functional team that's working with the manufacturing group and the operations and warehousing, distribution, etc., to bring it to life. And like the end-to-end ones are more complicated and more interesting to work on and kind of put together and tear apart why it's not working. So I think that's a fun place too.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Mary. It could be it's just getting involved in other areas of the business and using, that creativity from everyone to improve upon. So you're
yeah,
right.
I think the last thing I was going to say here is like it's beneficial to the organization and the individual. So I think, I think a big reason we try and emphasize that is it's really easy to get in your group think once you've been in a function for years. It's really easy to fall into the habit of just sticking to the status quo and doing things the same way we've done them. So when we open it up to people outside of that specific function, it creates the opportunity for someone with fresh eyes to come in and say, okay, how can we do this differently? While also like reigniting their passion and enthusiasm for the business too. So it's kind of a mutually beneficial thing for both the organization and the individual.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's an excellent point.
Yeah, Reagan, and it's also, oh, sorry, Michelle. It's
ahead.
also like such a cool way to like build your own personal brand. So like a million years ago, before like these kind of programs like even existed, I naively at Quaker went to marketing and pitched an idea that I made these cookies, and I went and I said, this is the greatest thing ever. And they were like, who are you? But like to your point, like that the whole thing happened. It became a project and it was known as the Mary Long Cookie Project. And then years later, I was at a distribution center and someone called me and I said Mary Long, because that's how I answered my phone. And they're like, is this the Mary Long? And I'm like, yes, yes, it is. I had no idea what they were talking about, but they were like, you're the cookie project person?
That is so funny.
That's awesome.
So you never know.
You never know is right. So we're seeing, companies starting to look at innovative benefits, I'll call it, right? So they're pushing popular types of benefits like unlimited vacation or hybrid work schedules. But, I really want to ask all of you, do you really think this is what people want? And are these types of benefits really what it's going to take to retain top talent? Who wants to start on that one?
Well, don't everybody hop at once. Here's what I would say is a lot of students don't even know that unlimited PTO is a possibility, and I think we should leave it that way because a lot of young professionals need the structure of a more structured work environment. And I think when you say, work wherever, whenever, who cares? I've seen them in the classroom. That means sometimes they don't show up to class, just every now and then. So I think there is something for being careful that you're incentivizing the right behaviors. And I will say from my standpoint, as a professor, most students do not want to go into full-time remote work as they're coming out and starting their careers. And I know that's been the pendulum has gone, it's kind of shifting, and there's a lot of conversation around that. But I think there's a lot of people early in their career that realizing not being in the office on a regular basis makes it more difficult to build your network and get kind of up and running and kind of have some of those casual acquaintances than if you are, have that option. And so those are two like things that are there. Reagan, I think you were getting ready to jump in and say something.
Yeah, I mean, I would say like as someone who's relatively new to their career, I think unlimited PTO, I don't know. I have questions around like how do you govern that? I don't work under a structure that has unlimited PTO. I get a certain amount of days per year. So I think that kind of aspect of the unlimited PTO topic is very interesting to me of like how do you regulate that? Because obviously you don't really want it to be truly unlimited because you still need people to come in and do their work and for the team to perform. So from a fairness perspective, like how do you weigh that out? And then if it starts to affect performance of the team, like what does that look like? So I would say like for me personally, I like it being more standardized of like you've been with the company for this amount of years, thus your PTO equates to this amount of days. I just think that makes a lot of sense, but I think if unlimited PTO could be done with like proper governance, then maybe it could make sense too, but I just have a lot of questions about how that actually works.
Yeah.
I
Go ahead.
Yes, I agree with you, Reagan. I don't have unlimited PTO right now. And I still don't go through all my days, so I don't know what my PTO would look like. Unlimited PTO would look like. But I would say I think if you're a candidate and one company has unlimited PTO, the other doesn't, I'm not sure if unlimited PTO would be like the selling factor. And I agree with Stephanie that people do want to go back into those offices. They want to have those organic connections. They want to collaborate in person, and they want to be back in the office. But I would say I think it's really important for a company to offer like hybrid if needed. I think just in the world that we're living in now, it's awesome if a company can say, yes, work if you need to work and take a couple weeks off, and work from home, go out of state. As long as the work is still getting done, having that trust within your team, to know that they'll still be working is awesome. And I'm looking at a lot of companies that are doing like those swipe. They are monitoring how many times people are swiping in. And I'm like, I don't like that at all. I don't think that's fair. I think you have to trust your employees, to know what they're doing and how they're getting their work done.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, go ahead, Mary, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. You go.
I was just gonna say, when I talk with a lot of organizations that are part of Awesome, and we discuss this, it to me, it sounds similar to what you're saying of some flexibility is good, but not complete unlimited flexibility, right? Like, so flexibility is always a good thing within parameters and guidelines. And if people don't show up to work, it really makes it hard to build a lasting culture, right? If people are all remote, how do you possibly create a corporate culture that can last and be, welcoming? And, we talked about it earlier, right? It's culture and impact. So if you don't have people there building that culture, you're never going to be able to do it. I haven't seen it done successfully with a remote work structure. And then the other thing I was just going to comment on is around the PTO is it's always interesting because Yalen, you touched on it, you don't even use up all your PTO because you've got, you're so busy. And what we know is high performers still don't take all of their PTO, right? So the rock stars are still going to show up and get the job done. And so I think that that's important. And then the ones that maybe are taking it aren't necessarily the ones that you would want to have that unlimited PTO, because they may be putting more work on the overall team. Go ahead, Mary. I know you wanted to say something. So.
Well, on this subject, I think it's one where I've seen the evolution of like my 25 years in industry versus what I see students and young leaders, more senior leaders emphasizing now is that people have gone through a process where they're much more comfortable understanding what their needs are. Like, where am I at? I need time for this thing that's happening in my family. And so I think it's required companies to do that same dance with individual employees, where they're willing to say, we trust you.
Right.
I think when we talked about this continuation of the webinar, it's, how do we keep the good people? Well, part of that is defining what is good. And good isn't just being there 24/7, like just showing up. That's not good. Good is performing and contributing. And that could happen that you're remote. But you're caring for a family member, but you're remote. They're still a good person. You still want to keep them. So I think that's the challenge that companies are, and I think HR is up for it. Like, we just as leaders have to be more nuanced in how we are engaging with people and what their needs are. And I think the talent today is 1,000% ready to be able to say what is meaningful to them and what they need.
Definitely more so than when I was entering into the workforce. We just kept our heads down and did what they told us to do, and whatever we got for PTO and all of that, it was what it was. So
there still is some impression management to happen if you're early in your career. Regardless of what the PTO situation is, whether it's hybrid, whether it's fully face-to-face, whether it's remote, you still have to do the job and do it well.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing, is making sure as a company you're equipping people, whatever the format, to be successful. But at the end of the day, each individual employee has to do their job and do it well. Part of that is staying in communication with the people on your team and your managers and your leaders, regardless of what the format is, whether that's dropping into an office, whether that's setting up a 15-minute touch base, once a week to make sure
Yeah.
we're so there's communication and showing that, yes, I am getting the work done regardless of the format. It's not an excuse to not do your job, because then the company, if I'm a company, I don't want to retain that talent.
And Stephanie, Mary, I would love to hear, have you seen where companies have been penalized when they've changed these types of policies and maybe offered something and then have had to walk it back over time? And has that had any type of effect on talent retention?
I mean, I'll jump in. Stephanie always goes first, so I'll jump in on
Please.
this one. It's an easy layup. I think it's just part of even like gaming culture. If you're playing a game and you've played it for a while, and then all of a sudden they change the rules and they take something away from you, you're not going to like that. And I think that happens with companies get reputation and they get known for a certain thing. And then when they have to dial back from that, it's harder with folks who haven't been part of that ecosystem. If you're part of it and you've been there for the explanations, then that makes more sense. If all of a sudden you're external and you hear this new thing, it may play a role in how they're perceived.
Well, and you look and go, okay, why are we even having this conversation? It's because we had a global pandemic. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what drove any of this
That's
conversation.
true.
That was a very specific event that everybody went through, and everybody had to figure out, how do we get through this and try to keep our people safe and keep them coming to work. And so everybody made these big statements of, this is what we're going to do, because nobody really knew, how long is this going to happen? What's, going to be the outcome and all those things. So in
Right.
times of uncertainty, we said, okay, hey, we're going to do this and move forward. Now that the pendulum has swung back, then companies are backing off and saying, okay, we're not going to do that anymore, which is, I think, something for organizations and organization leaders to think about of, yes, there are times you have to do things because of a certain dynamic in the environment. For example, all of the storm systems that have wreaked havoc on the Southeast and stuff, there's organizations having to make some changes because of what has happened there. That change is probably not meant to be long term. And so how do we communicate as an organization? We're going to do this for now, but we're going to keep evaluating. And so we're going to ask you as our employees to bear with us and know that we're trying to do the best for you and the organization and our customers and all of our stakeholders, but we're probably not going to, this isn't set in stone. And so how do we do that, communicate, but also not set it up that we're doing this, so that, because I know you can you can look on a lot of the popular press, a lot of companies have been really dialing back on some pretty profound statements and exceptions that they made, and they're seeing a lot of turnover. And that's, I don't blame either side on that, but that's something I think we can learn from moving forward in how we approach situations like that.
Michelle, I'll jump in with, I don't want to cut Reagan and Yalen off, but like one thing I noticed too here is that this has been a lever that companies who are in more remote, like maybe less attractive or cool places to live, they have used it successfully for recruiting. And as when it is like genuinely part of their culture, that like their CMO isn't in that city either, and it works perfectly fine. I think one thing the pandemic did show us was that companies can work perfectly effectively, lots of functions within there being remote. So like if it genuinely works for that company and they have then figured out ways to build the commitment and engagement with each other in a productive way, well, then that's a difference. But those are harder to find. So
I do think, it really comes down to communication, transparency, authentic communication, I should say, right? Like, so just meeting everybody where you are, being very open with, here's where we are today, and to Stephanie's point, that may shift in the future, and here are the reasons why, and just allowing people to hear that and also have a voice to speak their opinions as well. I think that that's just really critical, especially as we start to see these shifts happening. So instead of unlimited PTO, what benefits would be more attractive? Yalen, I'm going to start with you. So what would you think, what would you recommend to companies if they hadn't thought about different types of programs or other benefits that you've seen play out with you and your peers and your friends, etc.?
Yes, I don't know if this is necessarily a benefit, but I think just career progression transparency, just like right off the bat, having clear development conversations, offering opportunities or programs that encourage new learnings, like offering classes and like through Guild or something like that, and really asking, hey, where do you want to go after this? Like, what do you want to do in your role? What's something that really excites you, and how can we fit that into your current role? Today really is truly a motivating factor, I think, for a lot of young people who just want to get their feet wet and just learn as much as possible. And I think another really important element for companies that want to retain top talent is investing in who they hire, and creating an equitable experience for them. So maybe that's a mentoring program, or maybe you have a really high performer, but this is their first time in the corporate environment, and you need to offer these resources or programs, or pair them up with a mentor. And when you have programs like that very well established in your company, I think it's so important for companies to have that.
So Yellen, when we were talking, you shared a story about a program called Target Connect, which again, I think it's outstanding. Can you share that with the group?
Yes, it's so my company, and also many other companies as well, have programs that help at kind of just what I talked about, kind of even the playing field for people whose first experience, who maybe don't have a family member or a background in corporate, and it pairs them with a mentor that will be able to guide them and answer those questions alongside other programming that is like, how do you navigate a development conversation? How do you start seeking out new jobs? How do you start networking and finding like external connections, and make meaningful connections as well? Like, what are mentors? What are the 4 different types of mentors? How do you find a sponsor? And so I didn't know that fully coming into corporate, and through Awesome too. You guys have been an awesome resource for me as well.
Yeah, when you talked about, if you don't teach people how to do this, how are they going to know? And it's so true, right? Like, I didn't realize networking was important for first 20 years of my career, right? But at least you all have a jump on that. But how do you work with a mentor? How do you set expectations, right? The person, it's a two-way street. It's a conversation. So how do you kind of establish that structure and provide that guidance?
No, I agree. And it reminds me of part 1 of this conversation, something that Stephanie said, where she's like, how do you attract those students that maybe had to have 2 jobs during college? And those students that had the chip on their shoulder, they were at work and probably couldn't attend like supply chain club or those programs. And so now that they are in a corporate job, this might be the first time that they're learning that. So I think that's really critically important for companies to do. And I think super, super easy too, if you just have passionate people in your company, willing to lend a hand to the new hires.
Excellent. And Reagan, I know you talked earlier about flexibility. And when we were talking through this in our pre-meeting, you know, you had shared some thoughts, additional thoughts around flexibility. So tell us what's on your mind there.
Yeah, I think Galen touched a lot on like some great benefits for developing you within the workplace that I think are really important. Mentorship programs are super great. We offer some of those as well, which has been really helpful for this at this point in my career. I would say something else that like young people like myself look for when we're looking at organizations is how is the company also trying to support me outside of work. So we offer like a lot of great benefits when it comes to mental health, physical health. So we partner with like Spring Health for therapy sessions that can be provided on behalf of the organization. We offer like discounted gym memberships, which is really nice. Just kind of ways that like the organization is showing that they do care about your well-being, both at the workplace and at home outside of the workplace. I think um, any kind of benefits that can be provided in that area are helpful too and attractive to talent as well.
Yeah. So as a mother with young professionals entering in, we talked about like transitional resources, like budgeting and managing expenses and, you know, how do 401ks really work and things like that. I mean, it's so interesting when you talked about that because as a mom, I thought I did a good job raising my kids, but apparently I didn't because they're needing these resources. And so I thought that that was an excellent suggestion that if you think about it from a cost perspective, it's not that expensive to do, but it can really go a long way to provide a lot of support with these young professionals just coming out of school where they've got so much coming at them from a change perspective. That I just thought that that was a great suggestion that you had made.
Yeah, and that's something that I've used a lot, like just starting out of working is just meeting with a financial counselor that we partner with and being like, how do I build a proper budget, track my spending from month to month? And that's something that while I use it a lot at this phase of my life, like that's always going to be important is being able to manage your personal finances. So if that's a resource that companies can provide too, I think that's super beneficial. um, yeah, and we do like workshops on 401ks. I know we have like an upcoming workshop on mortgages, which that's a little bit ahead of my time. So I'm not quite attending that one yet, but it is nice to like have opportunities to learn about stuff like that as well. But because I think that should be a greater piece of like our education prior to entering the workforce. But if organizations can make that a bigger piece that they offer talent, I think that's great too.
Excellent. And Stephanie, Mary, do you have anything you want to add? If not, the questions are starting to roll in. So
I guess the main thing I would say real quick is at the end of the day, money is extremely important. And average starting salaries for supply chain students has done nothing but increase. And so if you're wanting to attract and retain the top talent, like you really need to be thoughtful on the financial package that you put together, because if you're not, other people are, and it's going to be harder to hold on to them. And then the other thing that I think is, especially right now, security is top of mind with a lot of young professionals and coming out. Yeah, a lot of companies are having very difficult times making very difficult decisions regarding things like furloughs and layoffs and stuff. And the top students are taking note of that. And they've talked to other students in certain industries and found out, some of the issues of, hey, when this happens, they extend start dates out 9 months or 12 months. Do you want to do that? And things like that. So just and not that every company can control all those things, and I get that, but the young talent that you really want are making sure they're well versed in all those items.
great. Yeah, that very, very critical point. And we're seeing more and more of that. So, I mean, that really does make a difference without a doubt. Okay, so our first question that we have from the audience is, does technology acceptance impact talent retention? Like the adoption of AI tools and daily activities versus companies that are anti-AI usage in work products. Yalen, I feel like you got something to say on this one. I saw you.
Oh, thanks, Michelle. I don't know. Okay, so I think how I interpret this question is if you have, well, every company should have continuous improvement. So if you are doing a process and AI can come in and reduce someone's workload from like 2 hours to like maybe like 15 minutes, that's awesome. That's what we should be doing because then that person can spend more time doing something strategically or working on something else in their role. But if there's a company who's like, don't use AI and like you're like typing into Chat GPT to like write an email, like I don't know why would top performers really are they really doing that? Like I don't think that's like a deterrent. And I think when you're innovating and when you're working on continuous improvement and you're working on these projects, I think just the way that everyone's going kind of leans into that direction. And so I don't think that it's a deterrent, but I think if there's a company who's like, do not use ChatGPT, I don't think that's something that would deter someone from saying like, oh, okay, I don't know if I would like to work for this company.
So from the university perspective, at the top universities like University of Tennessee and University of Arkansas, what are you seeing or teaching as students are preparing to go into the work around use of technology and AI?
I mean, for me, I teach a project management course, and AI has been embraced as embedded in some of those tools. So we don't teach the tools specifically, but the idea that you can use things to do rudimentary tasks and improve the process without jeopardizing intelligence, your company's proprietary intelligence, is something that I think that as students more and more use these tools, it would be like saying, a million years ago, like if a company, any new technology gets resistance. There are scarier things about AI and there's cybersecurity issues, but companies have to navigate these waters. That's what they get paid for, is to figure out what are their guardrails and how to embrace the application of new technology. And if they can isolate the application to things that to Yalen's point, it would free up a human to do something different and add more creative insights in an area that we haven't been able to get to, but have this rote report generation or going back 2 years in emails and looking for trend patterns. Have AI do that if you can safely within your company.
And I would say that a lot of universities spend a fair amount of their curriculum teaching supply chain technologies. And like, here's what's out there. Here's what companies might be using. Here's cutting edge type of things. I think the feedback sometimes I've gotten is the new professionals get out there and go, wow, everybody's not cutting edge. And it's like, that's
So
okay. I think part of what we do in the university level is try to say, here's what could be, what's coming, what potentially might change things to get people thinking ahead. But when Mary was saying, like, we don't teach necessarily always use a specific tool because lots of companies use lots of different tools. We want to teach you how to embrace and use those tools. I can say here at Arkansas, we've had quite a few discussions on how do we start being more intentional about including AI as part of our curriculum. It is going to change industry. I don't think we know exactly all the various ways, but yes, needs to be part of the conversation with our graduates so that they are prepared for it. But I also think companies haven't figured it all out either. So I think we're all in an area of like, let's try to figure out how to get comfortable. And as everybody mentioned, guardrails and stuff like that. So I think our role is to get people ready for whatever is out there and to be ready to jump in and tackle whatever it is.
Excellent. So the next question is, Galen and Reagan both seem to embody the positive stereotype of Gen Z being purpose-driven. That's great. I'm wondering, though, how can I balance that value with values of other generations in our workforce? I have all generations on my team, and I find that some other folks don't care as much about purpose and instead about things like hierarchy, tenure, etc.
Yep. Well, I think one of the things that I've heard companies try is trying to do things like partnering and reverse mentoring, partnering people in different generations and trying to, yes, there's some mentorship, but also some reverse mentoring. Why am I thinking about it this way? Maybe perhaps Reagan got interested in this when she was sitting in my class, X number of years ago. And like, I thought this was really cool. And she can share why she thinks that's cool with somebody who's never really had a chance to step back and go, why am I pushing the red button? I don't understand what the point of the red button is. Well, the red button is really cool. Let me tell you about it. So maybe there's some opportunities to do things like that, but foster, I think that's where that culture and those connections comes in. Have some time where everybody gets out in the office and just does something fun, like to build that sense of community and try to take down the generational walls.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else have anything to share on that?
I think it's really important to kind of also meet them halfway in a way. Definitely do not play your game, because you are your voice, and that's the strongest, most powerful thing that you have in your career. And I think authenticity goes a really long way. And so when someone maybe is older than you, and this is what they believe in, I think it's important to kind of speak their language, but also tell them, this is why I want to do this, and just have that conversation, because I think there is a lot to learn from their generation, and also it's like, well, this is how I'm going to do it too. And so I think it's important to kind of be well-rounded while also still sticking to what you believe in. Because I think as you continue growing in your career and just like as a person in general, that like your backbone or your North Star will continue to guide you even more.
Yeah. I don't think these generational differences are like, we've always had this. So the workplace by its nature brings people together who have different experiences and different points of view, and learning to navigate that on all sides, like on the side of someone who is in the position of that they're more senior, or they've been there longer, more tenured, but maybe they're not in a more senior position, but they've just been there longer. Like companies, they've had to learn to navigate this, and it's no different now, really. Maybe the differences in what people are prioritizing it change, and their ability to articulate and to share this is what is important to me have evolved. And that's where companies need to step in, and after we're through this weird period of what has happened with being remote and coming back, but still figuring out a way to acknowledge that commuting sucks for everyone. So like there's a lot of cool problems to solve. And if you don't engage people in that, I think that you're just going to be stuck in this exact same question over and over again. So the only way to the end point is through it,
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Reagan.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, I think like step one of this is really understanding like what motivates each individual and what do they care about. I know like some leaders in my organization, as part of like the performance review, they also take the time to ask each employee, like, what do you find yourself motivated by? And find a way to connect that like directly to what the team's goals are. So I think
Mhm.
that I think as someone who's more purpose driven, like individually, that piece is a little easier for me, but for someone who cares more about like tenure, um, with the company, kind of translating how that can tie into the team's goals and the team's progress, I think could help maybe bridge the gap between those two motivators and some of the differences there across generations.
So we have time for one more question. Do you have any recommendations for starting a formal mentoring program at work for new hires? We're a smaller organization, so it's not possible for a rotational program, but we want to offer something that appeals for Gen Z workers.
Yeah, I could answer this one. I would say if there's the opportunity for people to shadow others in the organization, whether it's just to take like an hour, a week, a month to go learn from someone else in a different department, that's just as valuable. It's basically doing like your own mini rotational program to get exposure to different functions. So that's one way. You could also do like a mentorship program, which we've touched on a lot here, where you could pair up people from different functions so they can learn from each other. I think that could be another opportunity too. I've done a lot of the sitting with other people and functions, not really even as part of my rotational program, just to like learn about other areas of the business that I'm not exposed to in my current role as much. And that's kind of helped give me knowledge of other parts of the company. So that's kind of what my piece of advice would be, is just to create a culture where people are open to teaching others and letting people sit with them and ask questions. You can kind of achieve the same results almost at a high level of doing a mini rotation program that way.
Very good.
I think you could also
Well,
do mentor circles too from those different areas. So then it's not quite a one-to-one. And so you've got kind of like a small group, but maybe they represent different areas. And so that's a way to kind of get at what Reagan was talking about, but then maybe having some more, here's specific topics that we're going to talk about in this kind of scenario. But I knew young talent will appreciate the opportunity to try to do that. So even if you don't get it perfect, get feedback or whatever, the fact that you're trying to make those connections will go a long way.
Yeah.
yeah, I loved, Stephanie, that idea of a mentor circle, because if you don't have a lot of bandwidth at that leadership level, you can actually have an impact. And then I always would throw on top of it reverse mentoring. I'll tell you what, I just think that everybody can learn so much from each other. We just have to be open to it. And so I just think that always fitting that into a mentorship program is really important.
Yeah, I think I'll add on like one clever thing I've seen done that seemed real effective and people had fun with it were an internal career fair. So like have different groups kind of along the lines of a mentoring circle, but like more like a 1 day time, and then executive leaders supported it. And so they actually got to hear like, what do people do in the planning department? What do folks do in these different areas? And it was set up like an internal little career fair. And that was a fun thing. So
Very cool. Well, we are at the top of the hour, so I just wanted to say thank you again for a fantastic discussion. I love that we, have multiple parts to this, because there's so much here to take away that companies can do to just help nurture and develop and grow and retain these young professionals. So thank you, Stephanie, Mary, Yalen, and Reagan, for your time and your insights and just sharing all of your lessons learned with us. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. I really appreciate you joining our conversation, and we look forward to seeing you at a future awesome event. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Take care.
thanks. Bye now.
Bye-bye.